The communication signal came from the edge of known space, crackling through Earth's deep space monitoring stations with the cold precision of advanced technology. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Global Defense Council chamber, watching the holographic display flicker to life above the conference table. The alien face that appeared was reptilian, with golden eyes that held centuries of conquest and pride. "I am Admiral Kethaval of the Zorathian Imperial Fleet," the creature spoke, its voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your species has expanded beyond your home system. This expansion ends now." The world leaders around the table shifted nervously. President Martinez of the Americas leaned forward, his hands clenched. Prime Minister Okafor of the African Union exchanged worried glances with Chancellor Wu of the Asian Coalition. They had all hoped this day would never come. But deep down, everyone knew humanity would eventually meet something bigger and stronger in the dark between the stars. Kethaval continued speaking, his golden eyes never blinking. "The Zorathian Empire has ruled this section of the galaxy for 3,000 of your years. We have brought order to chaos, civilization to primitive worlds. 17 species now serve the Empire willingly, their lives improved by our guidance and protection." Chen felt her jaw tighten. The word willingly carried a bitter taste, even through the translation software. "Your species shows promise," the alien admiral went on. "Your technology is crude but functional. Your people seem capable of following orders. Therefore, the Empire offers you a choice that we do not offer to all new species we encounter." The hologram paused, letting the weight of those words settle in the silent chamber. "You have 30 of your standard days to decide. Submit to the Empire's protection. Provide the tribute we require in resources and labor, and your species will find a place in our great civilization. Your colonies will be reorganized efficiently. Your people will serve purposes greater than their current, primitive existence." Secretary General Nakamura of the United Nations cleared his throat. "And if we refuse?" Kethaval's reptilian features shifted into what might have been a smile. "Then you will join the 43 species that chose extinction over progress. We have turned entire star systems into monuments to their foolish pride." The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the chamber in heavy silence. Chen was the first to speak. "How many ships do they have?" General Thompson, head of Space Command, consulted his tablet. "Our scouts detected 47 vessels in their advance fleet. Each one is roughly 10 times the mass of our largest ship. Their energy signatures suggest weapons and defensive systems far beyond our current capabilities." "What about the Prometheus?" asked President Martinez. All eyes turned to Chen. The Prometheus was humanity's greatest achievement in space warfare, a testament to human engineering and determination. It had taken 15 years to build, incorporating every piece of alien technology humanity had managed to salvage, trade for, or steal from the wreckage of other civilizations' failures. "One ship," Chen said quietly. "We have one deep space warship against an empire that has conquered 17 species." "Surely we can negotiate," said Prime Minister Okafor. "Perhaps we can offer them something they need without becoming slaves." Chen shook her head. "You heard him. This isn't negotiation. This is submission or death." Chancellor Wu leaned back in her chair. "The logical choice is clear. We cannot fight an empire. Our colonies have maybe 50 million people total. Earth has 8 billion. If we fight and lose, everyone dies." "If we surrender, we're no longer human," Chen replied. "We become another conquered species, our children raised to serve alien masters." The debate continued for hours. Economists presented calculations showing how humanity could survive as vassals. Military experts explained in detail how hopeless any resistance would be. Philosophers discussed the ethics of choosing certain death over uncertain slavery. Chen listened to it all, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the Prometheus, floating in high orbit above Earth. The ship represented everything. Humanity had learned about war, survival, and refusing to give up. Its crew of 847 men and women had trained for years to defend their species against exactly this kind of threat. Secretary General Nakamura called for a vote. The choice was simple: surrender to the Zorathian Empire or fight an unwinnable war. That vote was close. Very close. 18 leaders voted for surrender. 17 voted to fight. Chen had the deciding vote as Supreme Commander of Earth's Space Forces. She stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 8 billion lives on her shoulders. I've spent my entire adult life in space, defending humanity's interests. I've seen what we can accomplish when we refuse to accept limits. We built the Prometheus when everyone said it was impossible. We established colonies when they said space was too dangerous. We survived the climate wars when they said Earth was doomed. She looked around the table, meeting each leader's eyes. Every time someone tells humanity what we cannot do, we prove them wrong. I will not be the person who tells 8 billion human beings that they must kneel to alien masters because the math says we cannot win. The chamber erupted in arguments and shouting. Some leaders praised her courage. Others accused her of condemning their species to extinction. Through it all, Chen remained standing, calm and resolved. When the noise finally died down, she spoke again. I will take the Prometheus out to meet them. If we're going to die, we'll die as humans, not as slaves. Over the next weeks, Earth prepared for war in its own chaotic, determined way. Factories that had been building civilian spacecraft were retooled to produce weapons. Scientists worked around the clock to upgrade the Prometheus with every advantage they could manage. Underground bunkers were stocked with supplies for the survivors who might remain after the battle. The Zorathian deadline approached like a storm on the horizon. Long-range sensors detected their fleet moving toward Earth, taking their time, confident in their superiority. Chen spent those last days aboard the Prometheus, working with her crew to prepare for the impossible. Commander Williams, her second-in-command, found her in the observation deck on their final night, staring out at the stars. "Any regrets, Admiral?" he asked. Chen considered the question. Somewhere out there, 47 alien warships were coming to enslave or destroy her species. Tomorrow she would take one human ship out to face them all. "No," she said finally. "Humanity has always been at its best when the odds were worst. Maybe we can't win, but we can show them who we are." The next morning, Earth broadcast its response to the Zorathian ultimatum on all frequencies. The message was short and simple, spoken in Chen's calm, steady voice. "The people of Earth have considered your offer. Our answer is this: humanity does not kneel. We do not surrender. We do not accept slavery as the price of survival. If you want our worlds, you'll have to take them from us." The Prometheus powered up its engines and began its journey to the outer system, where the Zorathian fleet waited. Behind it, Earth held its breath and prepared for whatever came next. Chen stood on her bridge, watching the blue marble of humanity's home world shrink in the distance. Win or lose, live or die, humanity would meet its fate standing up. The Zorathian fleet hung in space like a collection of dark metal mountains, each ship bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display from the bridge of the Prometheus, her fingers drumming against the captain's chair. 47 enemy vessels arranged in perfect formation, waiting with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. "They're not even trying to hide," observed Commander Williams, standing beside her. "Look at that formation. They're practically showing off." Chen nodded grimly. The Zorathians had positioned their ships in a ceremonial battle array, the kind of formation used when the outcome was never in doubt. At the center of their fleet sat the massive flagship, easily 5 times larger than the Prometheus. Its hull was decorated with symbols that probably represented all the species the Zorathians had conquered. "Incoming transmission," reported Lieutenant Zhang from the communication station. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Kethval in what appeared to be an ornate command center. The reptilian commander looked relaxed, almost amused. Behind him, Chen could see other Zorathian officers watching with casual interest, as if they were about to witness an entertaining but predictable show. "So the humans send their single ship to face the might of the Empire," Kethval said, his golden eyes gleaming. "How wonderfully primitive. Tell me, Admiral Chen, did your leaders truly believe one vessel could stand against 47? Or is this simply an elaborate form of suicide?" Chen stood up, facing the screen directly. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earthship Prometheus. You want to destroy my people and enslave my world. I'm here to stop you." The sound that came from Kethval might have been laughter. It was an ugly, rasping noise that made several crew members wince. "Stop us? Child, my smallest escort ship carries more firepower than your pathetic craft. Your weapons are chemical, explosives, and crude energy beams. Your armor is barely adequate to stop meteorites." "Maybe," Chen replied calmly, "but you'll have to go through me to reach Earth." "Through you?" Kethval's amusement was clear. "Very well, I will give you the honor of dying first, so you can watch your homeworld burn from whatever afterlife your species believes in." The transmission cut off. Chen turned to her crew, seeing fear mixed with determination in their faces. These men and women had volunteered for this mission knowing they would not survive it. They were here because someone had to stand up, even when standing up meant certain death. "All stations report ready," announced Commander Williams. "Weapons online," called Chief Martinez from the weapons console. "Engines at full power," reported Engineering Officer Patel. "Defensive systems active," confirmed Lieutenant Commander Jackson. Chen took a deep breath. "Remember, our job isn't to win. Our job is to show them that humans don't give up. Whatever happens next, we make them remember this day." The Zorathian fleet began to move, their massive ships accelerating with surprising grace. The flagship led the formation, its weapons powering up with energy signatures that made the Prometheus's scanners scream warnings. "Incoming fire," Zhang announced, his voice tight with stress. The first salvo from the Zorathian flagship lit up space like a miniature star. Energy beams designed to cut through battle stations and planetary defenses converged on the small human ship. The Prometheus's shields flared and buckled under the assault, emergency lights flashing red throughout the ship. "Shields down to 60% from one hit," reported Jackson, his hands flying over his console. Chen gritted her teeth. If one shot from one ship could do that much damage, this fight would be over very quickly. "Return fire, all weapons." The Prometheus unleashed everything it had. Nuclear missiles streaked toward the Zorathian fleet while particle beams lanced out at the flagship. The crew watched hopefully as their best weapons struck enemy shields. The Zorathian flagship didn't even slow down. "No effect," Martinez reported, his voice flat with despair. Their shields absorbed everything. More enemy ships joined the attack. Energy beams crisscrossed space, all focused on the lone human vessel. The Prometheus shook and rolled as its shields collapsed entirely. Explosions echoed through the corridors as secondary systems failed. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, reported damage control. "We're losing atmosphere." "Weapons offline," called Martinez. "The main batteries are gone." Chen felt the ship dying around her. This was what everyone had predicted. What logic and mathematics had said was inevitable. One human ship could not stand against an empire that had conquered the stars for 3,000 years. But something inside her refused to accept defeat. Maybe it was the stubborn pride that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. Maybe it was the knowledge that billions of people on Earth were watching and hoping. Or maybe it was just the simple fact that Admiral Sarah Chen had never learned how to quit. "Engineering," she called over the comm system. "How's our reactor?" Patel's voice came back strained but determined. "Still stable, Admiral. The quantum core is running hot, but it's holding together." An idea began to form in Chen's mind. A terrible, desperate idea that would either save humanity or ensure their complete destruction. She looked at the tactical display, showing the Zorathian ships closing in for the final kill, and made her decision. "All hands, prepare for ramming speed," she announced. Commander Williams stared at her. "Admiral, even if we hit their flagship, we won't penetrate their shields." Chen smiled grimly. "We're not going to ram them, Williams. We're going to do something they've never seen before." She opened a ship-wide channel. "This is Admiral Chen. In 30 seconds, I'm going to order a full-speed approach to the enemy flagship. When we get close enough, I want engineering to overload our quantum reactor and create a cascade failure." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. The Prometheus carried an experimental quantum core, a power source, that bent the laws of physics in ways that human scientists still didn't fully understand. If it failed catastrophically, the results would be unpredictable and devastating. "Admiral," Patel's voice came over the comm. "If we overload the quantum core near their fleet, we don't know what will happen. The cascade effect could destroy everything in a 10,000-kilometer radius, including us," Chen acknowledged, "but also including them." She looked around at her crew, these brave men and women who had followed her into certain death. "Anyone who wants to evacuate to the escape pods has 60 seconds. No shame in living to fight another day." Not one person moved. Williams stepped forward. "Admiral, the crew requests permission to remain at their stations." Chen felt a surge of pride that pushed back her fear. "Granted. Engineering, prepare for quantum cascade on my mark." The Prometheus turned toward the Zorathian flagship, its damaged engines straining to build speed. The enemy ships continued firing, not understanding what the desperate human ship was trying to accomplish. Distance to target, 8,000 kilometers, reported navigation. 7,000, 6,000. Kethaval's image appeared on the screen again, his reptilian features twisted with contempt. "Are you seriously attempting to ram my flagship? Your primitive vessel will shatter against our shields like glass." Chen looked directly into his golden eyes. "You're right about one thing, Admiral. This ship will be destroyed. But so will yours." 5,000 kilometers, called navigation. 4,000. Chen could see the Zorathian flagship growing larger on the main screen, its massive hull covered with weapon ports and armor plating. It was beautiful in its own way, a masterpiece of alien engineering and imperial power. 3,000 kilometers. 2,000! "Mark!" Chen shouted. In the engineering section, Patel initiated the quantum cascade. The Prometheus's reactor began tearing holes in space-time itself, creating an expanding field of exotic matter that obeyed no known laws of physics. The last thing Admiral Sarah Chen saw was the look of sudden, terrible understanding in Kethaval's golden eyes as he realized what the humans had just done. The quantum cascade expanded outward from where the Prometheus had died, a sphere of impossible energy that made space itself ripple like water. Admiral Kethaval stood frozen on his command bridge, watching his instruments go mad as the expanding field approached his flagship. Numbers and readings that should have been stable began fluctuating wildly. "Report!" he barked at his crew, but the Zorathians at their stations looked just as confused as he felt. "Unknown energy field approaching," his sensor officer replied, his voice shaking. "All our detection systems are giving different readings. The computers cannot identify what we're seeing." The field reached the flagship Dominion's edge first, washing over the massive vessel like a wave. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the ship's systems began to fail in ways that defied all logic and training. Power levels. Dropping, reported the engineering station. Main engines are shutting down. I cannot override the safety systems. Weapons offline, called another officer. The targeting computers are not responding. Kethval felt the first stirring of genuine fear in his long military career. Transfer to backup power. Switch to manual controls. Sir, the backup systems are also failing. It's as if our technology is forgetting how to work. Through the viewport, Kethval could see the same thing happening to the other ships in his fleet. One by one, the great warships of the Zorathian Empire were going dark, their weapon systems shutting down, their engines dying. Emergency lights flickered on some vessels while others drifted completely powerless through space. The quantum field continued to expand, reaching beyond the immediate battle zone. Zorathian installations throughout the Sol system began reporting similar system failures. Mining stations on asteroids went silent. Supply depots stopped responding to communications. Even the Empire's advanced FTL communication array began, broadcasting nothing but static. "Sir," his communications officer said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we're receiving distress calls from 38 ships in the fleet, all reporting complete system failure." Kethval gripped the arms of his command chair until his claws left marks in the metal. 3,000 years of Imperial expansion, and they had never encountered anything like this. How had a primitive species with crude technology created a weapon that could disable the most advanced fleet in the galaxy? "Emergency power to communications," he ordered. "Contact Imperial Command. Report our situation and request immediate reinforcement." But when his communications officer tried to establish the connection, nothing happened. The quantum field had not only disabled their ships, but somehow interfered with their ability to call for help across interstellar distances. That was when the human weapons began firing. From hidden installations on Luna, Mars, and scattered throughout, the asteroid belt, primitive but effective weapon systems came online. These were not the advanced energy weapons that galactic civilizations typically used. They were simple, brutal devices that fired chunks of metal at incredible speeds or delivered nuclear explosives with chemical rockets. Under normal circumstances, such crude weapons would have been useless against Zorathian shields and armor. But the quantum field had shut down every defensive system in the fleet. The great warships that had conquered 17 species now hung helpless in space, unable to defend themselves against weapons their engineers would have laughed at just hours before. The first kinetic projectile struck a Zorathian cruiser amidships, punching through its hull like paper. The second and third projectiles followed moments later, and the ship began breaking apart, its crew rushing for escape pods. Nuclear missiles launched from hidden silos on Mars began finding their targets. Without shields or point defense systems, the Zorathian ships could only endure the bombardment. Explosions bloomed across their hulls as warheads designed to crack bunkers and destroy cities turned proud warships into drifting wreckage. "All ships report critical damage," announced Kethval's tactical officer. "We have no shields, no weapons, no engines. The humans are destroying us piece by piece." Through the chaos, Kethval's mind raced to understand what had happened. How had the humans known that their quantum cascade would affect Zorathian technology so specifically? How had they prepared hidden weapons throughout their system without the Empire's scouts detecting them? The answer came to him slowly, and it filled him with a cold terror. The humans hadn't known. They had been desperate, willing to destroy themselves if it meant taking their enemies with them. The quantum cascade had been a last act of defiance, not a carefully planned weapon, and somehow, that made it even more frightening. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." The main screen flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human woman in a military uniform. Behind her, Kethval could see what appeared to be a military command center filled with humans working at primitive but functional computer systems. "I am General Patricia Morrison, acting commander of Earth's Defense Forces," the human said. Her voice was steady, professional, and completely without the fear or hatred Kethval expected. Admiral Chen and the crew of the Prometheus gave their lives to protect our world. As a result, your fleet is now disabled and at our mercy. Kethaval found his voice. What do you want? Your immediate and unconditional surrender, Morrison replied. All surviving crew members will be taken prisoner and treated according to the basic standards of decency that civilized beings should show to each other. Your ships will be secured and eventually returned to your government as part of future peace negotiations. And if I refuse? Morrison's expression hardened slightly. Then we will continue firing until there are no Zorathian ships left in our system. The choice is yours, Admiral. Kethaval looked around his bridge at officers who had served the Empire faithfully for decades. These were beings who had conquered worlds and brought entire species to heel. Now they were trapped in a powerless ship, facing death at the hands of creatures they had dismissed as primitive savages. His tactical officer leaned close to whisper in his ear, Sir, if we surrender, the Empire will consider us traitors. We will never be allowed to return home. If we don't surrender, Kethaval replied quietly, we will never return home anyway. He straightened in his chair and faced the human general. On the screen. General Morrison, I am Admiral Kethaval of the Zorathian Imperial Fleet. The words felt like poison in his mouth. I formally surrender my fleet to Earth's forces. Within hours, human ships began approaching the disabled Zorathian vessels. They were crude craft by galactic standards, little more than cargo haulers, with weapons bolted on and life support systems jury-rigged to keep their crews alive. But they moved under their own power, while the pride of the Zorathian fleet drifted helpless. Human boarding parties entered Zorathian ships with weapons drawn, but without the brutality Kethaval had expected. They secured the vessels efficiently, treating wounded Zorathians and providing medical care to those who needed it. The human soldiers were polite, even respectful, as they escorted Zorathian officers to temporary holding areas. Kethaval found himself in a small but comfortable room aboard a human transport ship, staring out through a porthole at the wreckage of his fleet. A young human officer brought him food and water, addressing him as Sir, despite everything that had happened. Why? He asked the officer. Why are you treating us with kindness? We came here to enslave your species. The human looked surprised by the question. Because that's what decent people do, he said simply. You're prisoners of war now, not animals. Our people died to protect their families, not to become monsters themselves. After the officer left, Kethaval sat alone in his cell and tried to understand what had just happened. The Zorathian Empire had spent 3 millennia conquering the galaxy through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. They had never encountered a species that could match their weapons or resist their might. But the humans had defeated them without superior technology. They had won through desperation, sacrifice, and something the Empire had never truly understood. The willingness to die for principles, rather than live as slaves. More than that, they had shown mercy to their defeated enemies. In all his years of conquest, Kethaval had never seen a species treat captured foes with such dignity. For the first time in his long life, Admiral Kethaval began to wonder if the Zorathian Empire's way of ruling the galaxy might be wrong. News of the impossible victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by merchant ships, diplomatic couriers, and the Empire's own communication networks. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived under Zorathian rule there, entire lives stopped what they were doing to listen to the reports with growing amazement. The hegemony of Esikatal, the Zorathians' greatest rival, received the news first. Their intelligence networks had been monitoring the situation at Earth, expecting to watch another primitive species get crushed by Imperial might. Instead, they found themselves staring at reports that seemed impossible. High Commander Sikthai called an emergency session of the Hegemony's War Council. The reptilian beings gathered around their strategy table, reviewing the data their spies had gathered from the Sol system. 47 ships, Sikthai said, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. The Empire's third fleet, completely destroyed or disabled by a single human vessel. How is this possible? His intelligence chief, a scarred veteran named Skrath, displayed holographic recordings of the battle. The humans sacrificed their only warship to create what their scientists call a quantum cascade. This energy field appears to specifically disrupt technology based on domination and control systems. Explain, demanded HFY. The more a civilization's technology relies on forcing obedience, the more vulnerable it becomes to this cascade effect. The Zorathian Empire's entire technological base is built around controlling conquered species, suppressing rebellion, and maintaining order through force. The cascade seems to target exactly those systems. HFY leaned back in his chair, processing this information. And our technology? Skrath's expression was troubled. Similar vulnerabilities, High Commander. Our ships use many of the same principles as Zorathian vessels. If the humans can reproduce this cascade effect, the implications hung heavy in the air. The hegemony had spent centuries building fleets designed to challenge Zorathian supremacy. If this new human weapon could disable their ships as easily as it had destroyed the Third Fleet, then traditional galactic warfare had just become obsolete. What do we know about these humans? HFY asked. They're a young species, barely 200 years in space. Their technology is primitive by our standards, but they show remarkable adaptability. More importantly, their society appears to be based on cooperation rather than domination. Cooperation? HFY found the concept difficult to grasp. How does a species expand without conquering others? Trade, apparently, and something they call diplomacy. Instead of enslaving other species, they form partnerships and alliances. Their colonial worlds are populated by volunteers, not conquered. Populations. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. The Crystalline Collective, the Machine Orthodoxy, and dozens of smaller civilizations all struggled to understand how a species they had never heard of could defeat the Empire's greatest fleet. But it was among the conquered species that the news had the most dramatic effect. On worlds where the Zorathian flag had flown for generations, populations that had given up hope of freedom began to whisper about the humans who had refused to kneel. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Prometheus's chief, scientist who had survived the battle in an escape pod, found herself at the center of a scientific revolution. The quantum cascade effect that had saved Earth was spreading beyond the immediate battle zone, affecting Zorathian installations throughout human space and beyond. Working with a team of Earth's brightest minds, she began to understand what Admiral Chen's sacrifice had accidentally discovered. The cascade didn't just disrupt technology randomly, it specifically interfered with systems designed to oppress, control, or dominate other beings. It's like, the universe itself has rules about freedom, she explained to a gathering of human and alien scientists at the newly established cooperative research station orbiting Jupiter. Technologies based on mutual benefit and voluntary cooperation remain stable in the cascade field, but systems that rely on force or coercion break down at the quantum level. A Skatal engineer who had defected to study the phenomenon raised a clawed hand. Are you suggesting that physics itself favors democratic societies over authoritarian ones? Vasquez nodded slowly. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. The quantum cascade reveals fundamental forces that we never knew existed. It appears that free will and voluntary cooperation aren't just philosophical concepts. They're actual physical principles that govern how the universe works at its most basic level. The implications were staggering. If Vasquez was right, then every civilization in the galaxy would need to reconsider how they built their societies and technologies. Species that had conquered others through force would find their advanced weapons useless against the cascade effect. Meanwhile, refugee ships began arriving at Earth's outer colonies. The Keth Mori, A species that had fled Zorathian conquest generations ago, sent diplomatic envoys offering technology and resources. The peaceful Althan, who had survived imperial rule by becoming so useful that the Zorathians couldn't afford to oppress them, began sharing their advanced medical knowledge. President Martinez found himself dealing with requests for alliance and protection from dozens of species. Earth's small colonial government was suddenly thrust into the role of a galactic power, but unlike the empires that had come before, they had no experience with ruling others. "We don't want to be another empire," Martinez told the assembled alien ambassadors at the first Interspecies Cooperation Conference. "We want to be partners. We want to help each other survive and prosper without anyone being forced to serve against their will." The response was overwhelming. Species that had never known any form of government except tyranny began experimenting with democracy, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. The quantum cascade generators that Earth freely shared became symbols of liberation rather than weapons of conquest. But the most profound changes were happening within the Zorathian Empire itself. Cut off from their homeworlds by cascade-disrupted communication systems, imperial colonies began making their own decisions for the first time in centuries. On the industrial world of Thekmar, Zorathian administrators found themselves unable to enforce production quotas when their control systems failed. The local population, a mixture of conquered species, began organizing their own councils to manage resources and trade. Similar uprisings weren't violent rebellions, but quiet revolutions, as people simply stopped obeying orders from distant imperial authorities who could no longer enforce their will. The cascade effect had made traditional methods of control impossible, forcing communities to find new ways of organizing themselves. Admiral Kethaval, still a prisoner on Earth, watched these developments with growing fascination. The humans had given him access to their information networks, allowing him to see reports from across the galaxy. What he saw challenged everything he had believed about civilization and order. "Your people are destroying the Empire without firing another shot," he told General Morrison during one of their regular discussions. Morrison, who had become something of a friend despite their circumstances, shrugged. "We're not destroying anything. We're just showing people that there are alternatives to being ruled by force. But without central authority, without strong leadership, how do you maintain order? How do you prevent chaos?" "We don't prevent it," Morrison replied. "We channel it." Free people can be chaotic, but they can also be incredibly creative and productive when they're working toward goals they actually believe in. Kethaval struggled with this concept. "On my homeworld, we have maintained peace for 3,000 years through strong central control. Without the Empire's guidance, the galaxy will fall into war and barbarism." "Maybe," Morrison admitted. "Or maybe it will find new ways to solve old problems. Maybe species will learn to cooperate instead of just competing. Maybe the universe is ready for something better than Empire." As if to prove her point, the first ships of the new Galactic Cooperative arrived at Earth that same week. They weren't warships, but trading vessels, carrying representatives from 17 different species who wanted to establish peaceful relationships with humanity. The Zorathian Empire still existed, but its power was fading as the cascade effect spread to more and more of their installations. Meanwhile, something new was growing in its place. Not another empire built on conquest and control, but a loose alliance of free peoples working together by choice rather than force. For the first time in galactic history, the future looked hopeful. 5 years after the battle that changed the galaxy, Admiral Sarah Chen's memorial stood in the center of New Geneva on Earth. The simple black stone monument bore her name and the names of her crew, along with a single line that had become famous. Across known space, they chose to stand rather than kneel. Children from a dozen different species came there on school trips, learning about the day when everything changed. Today, a group of young Zorathians stood before the memorial with their teacher, a reformed Imperial officer who now worked for the Galactic Cooperative Council. "Why did the humans fight when they knew they would lose?" asked one of the children, her golden eyes bright with curiosity. The teacher, former Admiral Kethval, knelt down to meet her gaze. "Because sometimes losing with honor is more important than living without it. Admiral Chen understood that some things are worth dying for." The child looked confused. "But if they had surrendered, they would still be alive. Wouldn't that be better?" Kethval smiled sadly. He had asked himself the same question countless times over the past 5 years. Would it? If they had surrendered, your people would still be slaves. My people would still believe that might makes right. The galaxy would still be ruled by fear instead of hope. He gestured toward the memorial. These humans died so that everyone else could be free. They gave their lives not just for their own species, but for all of us. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening as former enemies became allies and teachers. The Zorathian Empire had not collapsed overnight, but it had transformed beyond recognition. Without their technology of control, Imperial administrators had been forced to learn diplomacy, compromise, and cooperation. The process had been painful but ultimately beneficial. Zorathian colonies that had relied on slave labor for centuries had discovered that free workers were more creative and productive. Worlds that had been strip-mined for the Empire's benefit began developing sustainable economies based on trade and mutual benefit. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now director of the Cooperative Research Institute, stood in her laboratory orbiting Saturn, working with scientists from 37 different species. The quantum cascade effect had become the foundation of a new kind of physics, one that took into account the relationship between consciousness, free will, and the fundamental forces of the universe. The cascade generators aren't just defensive weapons, she explained to her mixed audience of human and alien researchers. They're tools that help enforce what we might call ethical physics. Technology based on cooperation and mutual benefit becomes more efficient in the cascade field, while systems designed for oppression and control break down. A young hegemony scientist raised her hand. "Are you saying that the universe has built-in morality?" Vasquez considered the question carefully. "I'm saying that freedom and cooperation appear to be fundamental forces, like gravity or electromagnetism. Civilizations that work with these forces thrive. Those that work against them eventually collapse under their own contradictions." The implications continued to reshape galactic civilization. Species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of conquest found themselves having to learn entirely new ways of interacting with others. Many struggled with the transition, but those that succeeded discovered benefits they had never imagined. The Crystalline Collective, a machine intelligence that had enslaved biological species to serve as organic components, began experimenting with voluntary partnerships. They discovered that beings who chose to work with them were far more creative and effective than those who had been forced to serve. The peaceful Althan, who had survived imperial rule through submission and usefulness, emerged as master diplomats and mediators. Their experience with finding nonviolent solutions to conflicts made them invaluable in the new galactic order. Even the aggressive Sktal hegemony began to change. High Commander Sktai, who had initially planned to exploit humanity's quantum cascade technology for his own conquests, found that the cascade fields made traditional warfare almost impossible. Instead of fighting wars, species were forced to compete through trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. "It's the strangest thing," Ascathai told his War Council, which had been renamed the Peace Council. "Without the ability to simply conquer what we want, we've had to become better at making things others actually want to trade for. Our economy is stronger than it's ever been." The Galactic Cooperative Council, headquartered on a neutral space, station built jointly by 43 species, had become the closest thing to galactic government that had ever existed. Unlike the empires that had come before, it had no power to force compliance from its members. Worlds and species joined, voluntarily and could leave at any time. Surprisingly, almost no one chose to leave. The benefits of cooperation, trade, and mutual defense far outweighed the costs of membership. Admiral Kethval, now serving as the Cooperative's Director of Peaceful Transition, often found himself thinking about the irony of his situation. He had spent his entire life serving an empire built on conquest and control. Now he spent his days helping former enemies learn to trust each other and work together. "Do you ever regret what happened?" General Morrison asked him during one of their regular meetings. The human had become not just his colleague, but his friend, despite everything that had happened between their species. Kethval considered the question. "I regret the years I spent enforcing tyranny. I regret the species I helped conquer and the suffering I caused. But I cannot regret the day your Admiral Chen showed us a better way." Morrison nodded. She would have been amazed to see what came from her sacrifice. Sarah always believed that people were basically good when they were free to choose. I think she's been proven right. The newest addition to humanity's fleet, the exploration vessel Sarah Chen, prepared for its maiden voyage to the galactic core. Unlike the warship that had shared her name, this ship carried no weapons. Instead, it was equipped with quantum, cascade generators designed to protect the innocent and liberate the oppressed. Captain Williams, former second-in-command of the Prometheus, stood on the bridge of the new ship watching the departure preparations. His crew was a mixture of humans and aliens, all volunteers who shared a common dream of exploration and peaceful contact with new civilizations. "Captain," his navigation officer reported, "we're ready for departure." Williams looked out at the stars, thinking about his former commander and the crew that had given their lives to make this moment possible. "Set course for the galactic core. Let's go see what's out there." As the Sarah Chen disappeared into hyperspace, children across the galaxy looked up at the stars with hope instead of fear. They lived in a universe where freedom was not just an ideal, but a fundamental force of nature, where cooperation was stronger than conquest, and where mercy was more powerful than might. The Zorathians had pleaded for mercy and received it. In return, they had learned that humanity's greatest weapon was never the quantum cascade. It was the endless consequences of treating others with dignity, even former enemies. Admiral Sarah Chen's sacrifice had done more than save Earth. It had shown the galaxy that there was a better way to live among the stars. Her legacy was not just victory over an enemy, but the discovery that the universe itself favored freedom over tyranny, cooperation over conquest, and hope over fear. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, full of possibilities that no empire had ever imagined. And in the quiet memorial garden on Earth, children of many species continued to learn about the day when humanity refused to kneel and, in doing so, taught the galaxy how to stand. The future stretched out before them, unlimited and bright with promise. The age of empires was ending. The age of cooperation had begun.